Hello, Wotive community. I am Jackie Fox, and today I'm going to go even deeper into my thoughts on Sylvie. So this is definitely going to be a pretty niche video for people who have pulled Sylvie. If you don't have her, this probably isn't relevant to you, and it's probably past the time that I would recommend pulling her, and I'm not going to lie, I am having a little bit of buyer's remorse with Summer Helena coming out, since my light team, my light account is also my lightning account. And she's definitely something that would spice up that team and make it a lot more interesting and a lot more variable. But at the same time, I think Sylvie has a place in the future of light for sure, and is kind of an element that could definitely revitalize it. So let's talk about what makes Sylvie cool and some of the things you have to think about as you're running her, right? So Marion's protection, that is the always passive. So really you're choosing between March of the Saints, which is going to nullify Doom, not terribly important, and give her 24% magic. I thought that this buff was also supposed to get healing power up, but I could be misunderstanding that from looking a different unit that has like an upgrade to this buff or something. She also has Mind Body Unity. This is where you're going to get the additional 12 spirit for building her more spirit heavy magic counter builds. And you also have Blade Soul Lore, which is going to give her 12% agility and increase her spirit penetration by 40, which is going to make her very fast and very this kind of brings her a lot closer to being in parity with Elena as an offensive unit. Again, she is not an offensive unit necessarily. I'm not saying that she can't do that kind of stuff. Because this whole video you're going to be seeing footage of her in her Blade Soul sub, which is really, I think, key for unlocking her kind of offensive AI, because really removing all of her heals except for her LB changes the way that she thinks about a fight. She still will try to support a little bit more than she will. She's still going to heal first if she can, but once that LB is gone, she's really going to be she's going to perform a lot more like an offensive unit. So thoughts about her counters. Prayer of Protection, my biggest issue with this is that it only counters physical damage. It has the same healing mod as Aerith's reflexive counter skill. It hits 13 spaces instead of 9, which I don't think is a good upgrade when you consider that it doesn't do anything for magic damage. Now, this is one of the ways in which there are a lot of elements in Sylvie's kit that actually seem to prefer her for a defense anti-physical build. But I also don't think that this is her best counter at all. Preemptive Revenge would be pretty cool, but I still haven't run into many scenarios where she gets right up on a unit, and you probably wouldn't want her to. It is... Okay, I've got to admit that my view on how durable she is as a unit is largely based on her being on a team with Elena and Engelbert. Elena just ignores people trying to attack her a lot of times, and Engelbert does not take a lot of physical damage. So I think she's squishy compared to them, but that is an exceptionally high bar. She is a pretty durable unit. That being said, you still probably don't want her getting right up in somebody's face. You want her to be using more of her ranged moves. So I think her best counter for sure in most scenarios and across the board generally is going to be Regenerator. This is due to the upgrades to it, the fact that, the 10% health restore for 3 turns is now also joined by healing power up for 20 for those 3 turns, which is going to do a good bit to increase her healing power, which is already pretty nuts and overpowered. There was a point where I saw a unit get hit with healing power down, and she still came in with her LB and healed them for over 10,000. And that was without Regenerator, that was without this buff active. So, good lord. She's so overpowered as a healer that even healing power down doesn't necessarily stop her from helping someone. That's pretty nuts. And this counter is going to go a long way to doing that. The other thing I like about this counter is if you're in one of her non-Blade Soul sub-jobs, she can get stuck healing herself. If she goes below like 60 or 70% health, no matter what the scenario is, no matter how much you wish you would just reach out and slap the unit in front of her, she will heal herself instead. Unless she has no heals left, which is nearly impossible in White Mage, which is kind of a benefit, but in this case is going to lock her into a heal spiral that will lead to her death. The thing about Regenerator, though, is that it can keep her topped up, so that if she's taking some damage, I mean, she has to have been targeted for her counter ability to have gone off, this is going to give her more turns where she is active for damage instead of heal spiraling and trying to heal herself. It's not as much healing as I would like to be able to stave that off. I mean, she still gets in trouble if units hit her really hard, and it's more than Regenerator can deal with. And, you know, 10% plus all the healing power mods per turn just isn't a lot, but it's helpful. And it's probably going to heal her more than Prayer of Protection would, in addition to being a counter of all damage from any range. So, there's that. Okay, moving into sub-jobs, I'm not going to talk about her main sub-job too much. She doesn't need magic power up 40% on a heal. Because you want her to have all that magic power, sure. And, you know, in the case that someone on your team has been hit with healing power down, you want her to have a really overpowered magic stat and healing ability. And this is that. This is going to hit just as hard as her LB in a smaller cross-shaped AoE. This is also, if she's taken damage, going to encourage her to get a lot closer and definitely in the splash zone, so she could be taking some AoE damage here as well if she's getting too close to your tank. And this is a similar issue slash benefit that Cura has, to where potentially if your units are taking damage pretty early, this could break her out of the buff in place glitch kind of mental disability that some supports have, and actually encourage her to move in close with her teammates, which really just fixes that problem. It is an easy way to short circuit that issue. But at the same time, the trade-off to that is that it puts her in much closer range to get hit. So if you're running this sub-job, or if you're running Cura on in White Mage, this can actually be a really good use case for her reactionary heal. Except that, again, it's only for physical, so this is, again, only if you're facing a physical team. If you're facing mages, you may as well not have a counter if you have that active, so even Cura isn't going to make that work, but Cura and Healing Prayer will keep her close enough to the team that that splash healing of that heal is probably going to hit another unit as well, which is what you're going to want, because if it doesn't, it's probably worse than Regenerator for sure. So that is kind of the limited case that you would want to use that skill. You're fighting a purely physical team and you have something like Healing Prayer or Cura on. Because if you're in Blade Soul, if you're in Blade Soul, you're going to be more on the front lines. I could also see a case for this. So really, in Blade Soul, yes, I can see a case for it if, again, you're fighting a physical team. Bunny Loving Knight or White Mage if you have Cura on. It also makes sense if you're fighting a physical team. I would beat that in. And another thing, while we're talking about if you're fighting a physical team, the ability to turn off defense penetration is cool, although in the footage that you're going to see during this video, she uses it like 4 or 5 times, and at least half of those times she hits their tank. And unless that's snow, most tanks don't have defense penetration. Now, this is probably a thing where, you know, power creep is eventually going to lead us to more tanks that have defense penetration. Also, June potentially has defense penetration in her kit that she can give herself. And, you know, you can give any tank defense penetration with the right equipment. But this is enough to completely turn off defense penetration from a weapon or an accessory, something like the Thornlet. You know, this will do that and more. So this is really good for physical units, especially newer versus physical units, especially versus newer physical units, especially versus teams that don't necessarily have a tank that might draw this attack. Because it is a powerful attack, so, and it is an AoE, so it is one that and it's a small enough AoE that she's going to use it fairly regularly. Hopefully she's going to try to catch multiple units in it, because that definitely increases the effectiveness of the defense penetration debuff, which no one can resist yet as well, which is great. Also, it has 3 uses, so she'll have multiple unit opportunities to use it, but she is going to like to use other skills more, especially if you have her in Blade Soul, and that's really when you're going to be thinking more about how her offensive skills are going. One parade that I want to rain on, though, is Clever Paladin Strike. This is an excellent move if you have her on the Vanguard, if you have her running up front. Her having buffs, supportive skills, is naturally going to kind of push her to the rear or push her among other units. And because of the range of this is often going to mean that while this is technically her largest range skill, it also means that if there's any units in front of her, she probably won't be able to use it because she would be hitting them too. Now, that being said, it has a decent, I think like a medium mod. It has a chance to inflict slow on that whole area, which is cool, and it spills auto revive. And if you have her built with spirit penetration and she's fighting another Sylvie, this will often one-hit through re-raise, through shell, and kill the other Sylvie if it lands. So she can one-hit herself in places where other people can't. And kind of adding to that, that's one of the real benefits of Bunny Loving Knight, is that the Crippling Strike has a really potent decreased healing power, which might actually be relevant against her, but at the same time, she's probably the healer that is best at also healing through that disadvantage as well, so maybe that's not necessarily a good counter for her. But if she is running into a counter that is also thinking this way and using Crippling Strike, the best way to work around Crippling Strike is to boost your magic with Healing Prayer. So she counterplays her own counterplay for her. It's weird. It's weird. It is usually pretty interesting to see her versus herself, because if they ever line up too close to each other, they're like matter and antimatter. They will just explode randomly. It's interesting to see, because she is kind of the perfect counter for herself. So looking at White Mage, which is definitely my favorite to run, if you are running her in guild battle, this is probably going to be your preferred mode of going about it, because I think that she has the best benefit on a defense team. I've run her for 4 days as my defense team, and I have averaged 3 defends a night with her. As you'll see in this footage, I fought her with my offense team, my lightning team, and even though this actual map isn't great for her because everybody's spread out, she will never, ever in any case get to Engelbert in enough time to curata him, most likely. And Elena just runs away from her and does other shit, although I think I might be able to fix that by turning Stellamara back on for her. She has it in Arena, which is what always makes me think she has it on in Guild Battle, but I do sometimes turn that off in Guild Battle maps, and that might fix some of her problems. It also might make them stand back and heal each other for a very long time, which can be... I'll play with it. But this map doesn't seem to be good for her. Which is why it's amazing that despite that, she's still getting 3 defends a night, and is still capable of taking a match that should have been not good for her and ending it with everybody having full health. It's pretty impressive. Although, to be fair, Elena was juking my team in that fight. And the reason why you want to turn, okay, so what you should turn off: Cure, Shell, Protect for sure. Maybe even Raise. If you're really going for like that long run, I'm going to defend as many times as I possibly can and really stall out the other team, there is definitely a case for running Raise, just to give her something in her back pocket. She will never use it before full life, so don't worry about it interfering with that, maybe getting her killed before she can use full life. She's only going to use it when she's desperate. But it's also probably going to fail, especially on units like Engelbert. So, you know, that is a maybe. And I've already talked about Cura. Yes, it helps her keep up with the party, but that can be a double-edged sword, so whether you want to run that or not is up to you. But especially if you're running units like Elena, which even the smaller heal can heal up to full health, it's worth considering. And then Asuna? Yeah. She's only going to use it when it's important, so just run it. Her AI will figure it out. And I really think that that's the best one for just being really aggravating to people and just sustaining two other really durable units for as long as humanly and inhumanly possible. Which brings us to Blade Soul. Now, the thing you need to understand about the way her AI works is this is her priorities, her priority list. If a unit is under like 60-70% health, something like that, she will heal. That is number one priority. Number two priority is to buff if there are relevant buffs that haven't been applied yet. She will often do that instead of attacking, even in cases where she's in a more aggressive build, i.e. Blade Soul. Also, i.e. having the spirit penetration from Blade Soul lore in addition, which I think is a really good combination with this. Especially because, you know, it brings her a lot closer to being in parity with Elena, as I was saying before. So next to Elena, you are busting all of the tanks. It doesn't matter who the tank is or what they do, you're gonna slice right through them pretty well. Sword Song formation, I can see an argument for this, maybe replacing Prayer of Resolute Oaths, especially in PvE content, although at the same time she is not a multi-hit unit. So if you have a really strong light team like I do, you probably have a lot of options with triple hit moves, if not better. So you probably wouldn't run her in PvE. But I can see this being in PvP. I think that her defensive buff is a lot stronger, especially since it's aimable. She doesn't have to be right next to them. Though, because she has to be right next to them, this might actually help her keep up with the team in the same way that Cura does. So you might turn this on for some of the same reasons as Cura, with some of the same drawbacks as well. Most of her skills here, though, Brave Breaker, I mean, that it doesn't cost a lot of AP. It's very AP conscious move. Magic Buster as well has decent range, and you know, the decreasing attack and magic plays into her kit really well because she has high spirit and defense naturally. But Banishing Barrier also is interesting because this supports that side of her kit where there's a lot of spirit. This definitely works really well in conjunction with mind-body unity. But I'm pretty sure I have this turned off. If I haven't, I just haven't seen her use it that much. And it might take until the future job upgrades in the future when this becomes a 7,500 HP barrier for me to really consider it. But this is a move that you aren't going to use at all on the same teams that are really using True Paladin Strike. Again, it's kind of niche in that same way, in that it only deals with one damage type. So certain builds and certain teams are really going to like this, certain builds aren't, and you definitely want to turn it off on the ones that aren't, because this is definitely another move where she will stand in place and cast it on herself. So this is the kind of thing that you probably want to weed out of her kit unless you need it. The huge standout in this, other than the fact that there are no heals, this is her only sub-job without heals. So if she only has her LB to heal, that means that she's going to heal once, and then she is fucking people up for the rest of the match. That is how you hack her AI to not heal Spiral ever, because she can't Spiral if she has only one heal. That's definitely going to bring her to full health and give her a 50% barrier and AP auto restore. The one thing though that I will say other than that, just kind of overall observation about Blade Soul, is that I actually like Slate Wiper better, I think, than I'll Protect Everyone. And let me just look at them side by side to be sure. 20 AP for Slate Wiper. I'll Protect Everyone is 28. Slate Wiper has a lower mod. It is a dispel. Oh, wait. So it only dispels all buffs when performing a critical hit. Okay. Interesting. I didn't realize that, but it is across AoE. It does dispel haste even if you don't. It does dispel physical and magic damage increased buffs, which are starting to become more common, but aren't really that common, so that's not huge. But I do like this because it has just a little bit more range, and it is an AoE skill, but also it's lower damage than I'll Protect Everyone. So she's not quite as likely to use it unless it's super advantageous, which means that she'll be using skills like True Paladin Strike, Clever Paladin Strike, stuff like that more often than just spamming I'll Protect Everyone. I'll Protect Everyone is great. Also does the physical magical damage increase dispel. So really, other than dispelling all debuffs for herself, dealing a lot more damage, which I actually think in terms of the AI is a little bit of a drawback because it makes her spam this move more than Slate Wiper, where she's going to use it when it's really necessary. But Slate Wiper only dispels the buffs if there's a critical hit, so I guess it's less likely, and I'm not sure how great she is as a unit for getting critical hits. So actually looking at this, I'm not as sure whether I like this more, but generally speaking, when I run her Blade Soul at least, I turn off I'll Protect Everyone and just let her use Slate Wiper on people. It works great. I love it. It gives her another AoE, and it doesn't have the same AoE problem that I was previously mentioning with Clever Paladin Strike, because it's a lot easier to work in a cross-shape AoE that has a bit of range away from you than Clever Paladin Strike, which is a diamond that will always reach back to the square in front of you. It's only, the middle of it is only a 3 range away, so it's always going to reach back to you. So unless you're in between the other units on your team, or they're standing like diagonal in front of you, you would also hit them too, which is going to turn off essentially her AI's ability to use the skill at all, which Slate Wiper doesn't have that problem. So Slate Wiper gives her kind of a cool AoE that's not true Paladin Strike. And if you're going up against more magically oriented teams, and you don't want to use True Paladin Strike at all, which again is a thing that you will want to turn off if you are hunting mages, then Slate Wiper suddenly has double duty. It is now your only good AoE attacking skill, even though it's kind of low damage. At the same time, like, it's more of a setup move. You're probably hitting a tank, you're dispelling their hate, that kind of thing, you're dispelling their haste. So it's more about breaking that unit down than necessarily taking them out. Now, I mean, of course it's always good, even if the dispel lands, to take the unit out too. You've just dispelled their life, their ability to annoy your team anymore, and that's great. But I still think that, you know, if you're running Blade Soul, Slate Wiper is probably the standout skill here, and maybe even the replacement for I'll Protect Everyone. Definitely a good skill. I leave Magic Buster and Brave Breaker on. They're good AP efficient skills. They do good damage. I mean, she has such high magic that any of these skills, even with the lower mods, is going to do pretty good damage, especially if it's in a good place on a chain. So, I mean, I leave them on. They're close range enough that she's still going to use all of the cool skills that I really like first, and then only use these kind of things to finish people off. And the fact that she has to close in on them to finish them off with these skills also makes it a lot more viable that they have lower mods. Because again, she's hit you with her larger mods already if she's gotten this close in range. And she really only needs Magic Buster or Brave Breaker to finish you off. So, they're not bad. They're not the best, but they're not anything that I would turn off either. They're good finisher skills. So I usually leave those on. So, with all of that being said, we have covered pretty much everything about this girl except for her possible combinations on teams. And maybe that's the thing I'll look into in the future, but I think that really the primo team for her right now is Engelbert and Elena. Her Prayer of Resolute Oaths is such a strong skill to put in conjunction with Engelbert. And Engelbert's biggest weakness, the only thing that doesn't make him the absolute impenetrable brick wall that he used to be, is the commonality of defense penetration. So, on a team with Engelbert, where you are fighting physical opponents, his best friend is going to be a Sylvie right behind him using True Paladin Strike on the enemy DPS. That is absolutely going to break their ability to deal damage to Engelbert. On the other hand, and with certain other builds, I would highly recommend running her with Elena. Elena is a great unit, even if she only dodges every other hit, even if she has to use Courage to survive a guaranteed hit move, which leaves them with hopefully too little AP to cast it again, which allows her to get curated and maybe dodge a couple moves after that. Really good team with her, but also really comparable to her in terms of spirit penetration and slash penetration potential and tank busting potential, because they both have really amazing passives for that type of stuff, and the cards that you can put on them can definitely benefit that stuff as well. There's definitely other ways that you can increase these things, so you could actually turn these two into incredible tank busters that will really benefit from having a strong tank with them to keep them even safer, because especially going all in on their tank busting capabilities can leave them with a little bit of a weakness to being punched in the face. So I think that that's kind of the ideal team for her, but also I think that she would work on a lot of rainbow or multi-element slash teams, or just as a general support in a lot of the same ways as Velas. And some of those are demonstrated in this video. I thought the fire team that she was on was particularly interesting. But as far as I'm seeing right now, I think that the peak power and annoyance of Sylvie in multiple builds all revolve around the same team of Elena and Engelbert at the moment. Maybe we'll see new characters or new abilities that makes this a little bit different in the future. But also, Engelbert's getting better in the future, like giving himself a AoE self-heal and regen is going to be really good for him. Putting regen on Sylvie outside of Regenerator could be really cool. It could also kind of open you up to maybe use Prayer of Protection more often, which might be interesting, especially on Engelbert teams where you are really trying to fight physical units that he can wall really effectively. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Those are my thoughts on Sylvie. This has hopefully been more than you ever wanted to know about this girl. And if you are still watching, if you made it through what is nearly 30 minutes of me talking about one unit in way more detail than you ever needed to know, like, subscribe, check this channel out. I'm not going to post all that often. I don't think we need anybody else to give us the news in WOTIV. I think that most of the players who are actually going to benefit from the kind of coverage that I am doing of units, especially light units, because they happen to be my favorite and the ones that I can build full teams around the best, the kind of people who are going to benefit from that can read the news for themselves and figure out what's going on. I think you're savvy enough to do that. And if you are looking for someone to read the news to you, I highly recommend Umbra Rays. He does cover global content, but he does primarily do JP, which will give you a 4-month window kind of advantage of knowing what's coming and being able to plan for it than you would have if you watched a global-only content creator. I mean, they do talk about JP every once in a while and what's coming, but at the same time, they don't focus it and live it the same way that a creator like Umbra would. Cabbage is apparently back and making content again, which is cool, but Umbra is definitely the one you want to go to, in my opinion, if you want the news read to you from a JP perspective and get kind of that 4-month window of knowing everything that's coming. On the other hand, if you're looking for more in-depth videos on generally any unit that comes out, similar to this, but even better, I would recommend Ready Player Well. Definitely. Multi-part videos can even get even longer than this. Like, his 3-parters can really be close to like an hour for one unit, but he pretty much covers everything, like really good detail. I appreciate him when I pull a new unit and I want to know the most absurd things I can do with it. That is definitely where I go. So, with all of that being said, what I plan to do to fill in this gap or gaps in the knowledge, I am probably primarily going to look at new light units and new systems and mechanics and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to be doing, I think the only things I really have planned for this channel into the near future is to do guides on the reincarnation system before it comes out, and kind of a guide of like what you can do now to prepare and what units you might want to be preparing for, because I'm seeing a lot of units that seem like they really stand out. Like with the reincarnation updates, they're mainly starting from like first released oldest units, which also happen to be the ones that have been buffed through master abilities. First. Basically, they're the units that go first anytime there's a new buff, and also the units that are most outdated when a new buff comes through. So it makes sense that they would start with them. But there are also definitely units in this that are a lot newer. Like, one of the most surprising and one of the newest that I've seen on this list, other than some other things that we kind of figured would be coming, like the Warrior of the Crystal stuff, Queen Macherie and Dark Fina. Like, units that we have only gotten recently and that are still pretty relevant in the metas for their units. And they are getting 140 upgrades within like the first month of the system. So that's going to be pretty awesome. I mean, and you know, Queen Macherie might be especially strong with 140 Oberon, and then you've got Rurugier or Lelugier, whatever we end up calling him, the Earth Gunner, who is also getting a 140 upgrade a little bit after he's released. But let's see if they can maybe fix the timing of that before it hits global, so that he gets released as a 140 unit. Maybe. I think it could be done if they shuffle some things around, work on release dates. That might not be the way that global players want it to go, but it could be. It could happen. But yeah, if you want to hear theory crafting about that, or maybe some guides as to what you can do to plan for certain elements in the early 140 meta, I'm going to be keeping, that 4-month window open to where I'm looking that far into the future to try to see what is coming. And because I think 3 to 4 months gives us, especially as guild leaders and guild organizers, a great chance to peer into the future and see what to save for now, because we have a lot of systems for slow building, and for people who have good established teams now, you could use all of those, repurpose all of those same slow building systems to be building units that are going to be amazing in the future, and being ready to go all the way with them kind of the second that they drop. I think that is where we will find some power, and finding the gems among those early releases, that's going to be really cool, and that's going to be something that I am excited to be looking forward to. But I think I'm gonna wait until, we're maybe like 6 weeks in, maybe towards the beginning of January, before I really start evaluating some of these units and deciding which ones global players should be saving for in advance. Anyways, thank you for listening and have a great day. Don't spend all your viz in one place either.